Now then, are you curious about stuff? We all are, aren't we? Then you're in the right place. This is definitely the right place. I'm Burnsy, by the way. I'm your host, and I can say officially hello and welcome to our first ever, but soon to be very regular Curiosity podcast. It's called, snappy this, the CuriosityCast. Remember it, tell your mates about it. Every episode, we're going to take questions asked by members of the public in Hull, the fine city of Hull, and try to get them the best answers from the very best brains in the city. And there's a lot of brains in the city, as you'll find out on the CuriosityCast. I'm getting used to it. Not all questions are about Hull. They can be about whatever you want to discover and whatever you're curious about. This episode, the first ever, don't forget, I have a feeling we'll be covering a lot of Hull stuff, as our guest is a maritime guru, I hope he doesn't object to the word guru, and British historian. He's a doctor, not that sort, so you're all right there. Dr Robb Robinson from Hull University. Nice to see you, Rob. How are you?
It's good to see you, Burnsy. I'm very well.
Okay. Excited about the CuriosityCast?
Very much, because I've always wondered why about everything. And I like it when other people wonder why as well.
Okay. Do you wake up in the morning thinking why?
And I usually wake up in the middle of the night thinking why.
It's your age, Rob. Happens to all of us. Maybe that's a question that'll come up on a future CuriosityCast. Why do men of a certain age get up in the middle of the night? We'll find out why. The CuriosityCast is the place to find that. Should we get into it?
Yeah, go on.
We've got questions coming in, all sorts of questions. So we'll start with a big one, given we're in Hull. And this has been asked by Jake in HU12, which is South Holderness. Lily in, that was my mum's name, HU5. It's not my mum, she's long since gone, in the Avenues. Rocky, not the boxer, I think, in HU17, which is Beverly. And an anonymous pupil from Westcott Primary School who just wants to keep it on the down low, I think. So the big question, first one ever on the CuriosityCast, Rob, why is Hull called Hull?
Well, that's really intriguing, isn't it? It's Kingstown, or Kingston upon Hull.
We're poshing it up then.
Well, we're getting very posh, really. And of course, it wasn't always called that. When it was first a settlement, it was called Wyke. And Wyke merely means Vic, which is, if you think about your Nordic, you go to Reykjavik, you go to Larvik, you go to various other places. Right. Vic means harbour. And really, it's of sort of Viking origin in a sense. But it became known as Kingston upon Hull. So where does the Hull come from?
I'm asking you. Don't you ask me, because I know nothing. When you mentioned Vic, I thought of Department S, and is Vic there, the song? I'm sorry, I've digressed there. There'll be a fair bit of that on the CuriosityCast.
I'm lost. No. Yeah, seriously, it comes from Hull, and the Hull is from the River Hull, of course. So that immediately prompts the question, where does Hull get its name from, the river?
Yes.
That's a really intriguing one. It's probably Celtic in origin, or ancient British.
Right.
It's probably that old. And it means something like bubbling stream or frothy stream or something like that, or something to do with that sort of line. And that would have had its name. So from, pre-Roman times, very early on. So that's where probably that gets the name from. The Kingstown upon Hull, of course, we know because Edward I acquired the place and gave it the privileges that allowed it to become known as Kingston upon Hull.
So roughly when was this? Edward I?
Edward I, we're talking about, the 1299 is the classic age when we think about Hull. We're talking about the 1290s, certainly, in that period of time. And for him, of course, what was it? It was an important place to be able to go and make his attacks on Scotland from. If you think about Edward I and his grave...
I'm Scottish. I'm not happy about this.
Yeah, you wouldn't be, because if you go to Westminster Abbey and you see,
which is a bus ride from here.
Exactly, just a bit away. You'd find on his grave, on his sarcophagus, it says Hammer of the Scots. And that's because, of course, one of the things he did was try to subjugate Scotland. And he wanted a base. And one of his bases for attacking Scotland was Hull.
Right. Okay. So that's how we've got it. So that's the first question. We've got a follow-up from Jodie in HU7, which is North Hull. Has Hull always been called Hull?
No, because it was called Wyke in an earlier age, if we think about it. And we have no idea what sort of things it might have been called before that, but certainly the settlement which Hull came from, probably started off in the 1100s because it was an important place on the River Humber or close to the River Humber where you could load and unload ships. That's very rare on the Humber to find anywhere decent on the estuary to unload. There were only a few places, and Hull was important in its day.
You're ahead of the game already, Dr. Robb Robinson from Hull University. He's Val had sent us a question. Val's in HU10 in the West Hull villages. She's poshing it up there.
Oh yeah,
we'll maybe do one on in the future on CuriosityCast. I'm getting there eventually as to why it's poshed up in the West Hull villages. Send that one in, somebody. But Val wanted to know how is old is Hull. We don't have a specific date, but we're somewhere in the 1100s.
We're somewhere in the 1100s, but that doesn't mean to say that's the first time people lived in the area. It's probably earlier than the Roman period, or certainly around the Romano-British period. There were probably small settlements on places like what they call the Till Islands, of places like Sutton or Warne and the like, where probably people came at certain times of the year to exploit the swamplands or the wetlands in the area or graze cattle. So the settlements in the area probably go back further than that. But a proper town, as we would call it, a settlement, we date probably from the 1100s. Right
then, Chris in HU6, which is the Newland Ave Beverley Road area. Emma in HU3, which is Hessel Road, the centre. I don't know whether that's Emma Hardy, one of the local MPs. I'm not asking the question, it might be. Why is Hull called Hull and not Kingston? Are we just lazy?
No, but Kingston upon Thames, everybody immediately thinks
it's posh there.
Yeah, well, it is, but also it was called Kingston upon Thames was called Kingston upon Thames much earlier than Hull even existed, if you like. It probably dates back to a time, I think I've got the right Saxon king, but Egbert or somebody like that, who was the king. King. It was his king's town. It was one of his towns, or certainly his estate. So Hull comes along later, and you really want to distinguish it from Kingston upon Thames, don't you? So you'd probably call it Kingston upon Hull. That's my take. There's lots of different ones, but I quite like it being called Hull. I don't think I'd want to turn around and be called Kingston.
When I used to do the radio, people used to ring in quite a lot and say, well, we need to posh it up, Burnsy. Why are we not calling it Kingston? But, now we know why.
Well, we could do if we wanted to, but do we really want to?
It's Saturday night posh occasionally. We don't want to do it all week. Let's be honest. And you just mentioned Egbert there. Is that a name that's going to come back? Because the names come back. Me and you both drop our grandkids off at local schools, the same local school. And, I've got a grandkid called Ernest.
Yeah.
Is Egbert going to come back? You might not know that. I don't know that, but we could set a trend here.
We could indeed. I don't know many Egberts.
No, neither do I.
No. Yeah.
Well, you knew that one, and that was the important one.
I've
not
more recently.
There, Rob. I've digressed. We'll relax into this.
Right. Yeah,
we'll relax into this. Okay. Just quick ones, actually. Why is Beverley called Beverley? It's not called after a big lass in a leopard skin dress. Or
no.
Like that.
Beavers. Beavers used to run wild around the British Isles. Yeah.
I almost went there.
I saw your face go then.
Oh, dear. And that's producer Dave in the background. I suspect this bit will never make a CuriosityCast.
Well,
the Christmas outtakes.
Why does it get called Beverley? Well, there used to be beavers running around wild in Britain. They've recently been reintroduced. And Lee means meadow, sort of beaver meadow. So it probably dates back from that time. I don't know whether with all this reintroduction of beavers, they'll decide to reintroduce some in Beverley or in the area. But it's an interesting thought.
I'm going to give myself a pat on the back there for resisting it. Why is Kingswood called Kingswood? These are all quick questions, Rob.
Don't know, really. That area, I think it's more recent.
That's producer Dave.
Don't know. Somebody out there.
The first one, producer Dave. For goodness' sake, give us a break.
Somebody out will know. But what is interesting is if you think about a lot of these places surrounding Hull, they've got new estates on, but the areas before, have a long history It might have been agricultural. It might have been marshy. There was a lot of exploitation of the wetlands in these sort of places. And some of the names, and we ought to make more of the little names of the idiosyncratic sort of spots along the river. And it would be worth doing that. And certainly Kingswood is an area, people are just coming to know as they move on to that area.
Here's we're going to a quick question about one of the places in Hull which I feel is underdeveloped. It needs a tap room or something like that. Why is Hull's train? This is personal. Why is Hull's train station called Paragon?
Oh, Paragon of Virtue. This is the place. It's the only one in the country.
It was just behind the tower, Rob. I suspect that the Paragon of Virtue thing didn't happen very often, just behind the tower on Anlaby Road.
But just think, it's the only one in the country, as far as I know, that's called Paragon.
Yes.
It's quite something in itself. Of course, it sounds a lot better than calling it Hull Interchange, doesn't it?
It does.
It rolls off the tongue a bit
class.
better. Yeah.
This is the CuriosityCast. I'm Burnsy. This is Dr Robb Robinson. And we're on to question 2, asked by Anonymous. I suspect there might be quite a bit to this answer, but I could be wrong. I hope I'm not wrong. Has anything been invented in Hull?
Yeah, loads and loads of things. If you think about it, and I'm probably hardly scratching the surface. I'm just picking on a few here. I suppose one of the most fundamental things that we all deal with on a regular basis is that was invented in Hull was the liquid crystal display. We don't immediately walk around and buy some, but everything we have, mobile phones, TVs, a lot of those sort of things have been involved in that. And that was, of course, Professor Sir George Gray from the university, who played such an important role in that one. But think about things like sweets. They reckon boiled sweets. Needlers. It's often claimed that Needlers were the people who invented boiled sweets. I mean, there must have been something similar around before, but certainly that's something we have in Hull. Shouldn't
we have a big sweet at the entrance to the city on an LCD screen as they come in? Yeah. Come on, Council, if you're listening to the CuriosityCast, that would be great. Home of the boiled sweet.
That would be very good. Now, there are all sorts of other things.
You've damned me there, Rob. You're thinking that's not a good idea, Burnsy. Shut up.
I think that's not a bad idea. But think about just a minute. I'm just going through what's rattling through my brain on this one. Think about Reckitt and Coleman and the Reckitts, particularly what they've been involved in over the years. Dettol, something that's used universally across the world. That was developed in Hull in, I think it was 1932.
That'll save quite a lot of lives.
Yeah. It? And one of the things
for those that don't know what Dettol is.
Well, that's antiseptic, isn't it?
Yes.
And if you don't know what it is, you're, you are a bit rare because it's one of those things that is known, or people have come in contact with it in all sorts of different ways. It doesn't quite give its name to antiseptic in the way that sort of biro gives its name to ballpoint pens,
right?
But it must be getting close in terms of what it is.
There we go. Big up, Dettol.
Thinking about Reckitts, one of the classic stories, and I never know the full length of truth about it, but it's a great one, and it must have much more than an element of truth in it, is, of course, the invention of Disprin, soluble aspirin.
Right.
The story there goes that, of course, one of the few painkillers that people could get their hands on in the early days was aspirin. And aspirin, of course, can be very upsetting on the stomach, on the digestion. Uh-huh. And for a long time, people studied and worked on this. And didn't really get anywhere. And then not long before the war, I think Reckitts assembled a team of people to work on this in their labs in Hull. And then the war came, and all these scientists were taken away to do other jobs, except one who was left. And I'm sorry, I've forgotten his name, but this one chap who was left working on it kept going. And then suddenly, in the Blitz, his workshops, his laboratories were bombed, and he was sent to work in the laundry. And while he's working in the laundry, he starts thinking about the sort of things they use in the laundry: bicarbonate soda and like, I'll mix it with the aspirin. And gradually, he didn't finish the job off, but after the war, they finished the job, and they developed Disprin. So it was actually working in the laundry, thinking in a different way that inspired him to come up with the final development on that one.
Steward's inquiry, though. I don't think that's an invention. I think it's a development of an existing thing.
Right. Well, that's an intriguing one itself. When is
we're going all technical now on the Curiosity Cast.
Now, that's an interesting. One is an invention and an invention, and when is it an innovation? Right. I mean, when we were kids at school, a lot of us remember we were told about the steam engine, the invention of the steam engine, and James Watt was sat in his mother's kitchen one day, and he saw the lid on the teapot. The kettle going up and down. Now, we all know that's a load of bunkum because it developed slowly. I mean, already they developed the sort of bore for boring metal for cannons and the like. They'd already developed a few sort of metal vessels that could hold steam. And it was just a development of things that went. So, and that, in a sense, takes me to another one, because two other things then you could say invented in Hull that might fit that one are things like bricks. Is it bricks? Well, what I mean by that is they used bricks in this country until AD 410, when the Romans left the country.
Right.
Then they stopped using bricks. One of the first places in the country to start reusing bricks in the early 1300s was Hull. They built the walls out of it. They built various buildings around the town out of bricks. So it was taking something that other existed and developing it and using it in a way. We had plenty of clay. We didn't have a lot of stones, so it made an incentive to use it. And then much more recently, if you think about it, in terms of construction stuff, is the development of reinforced concrete, Hennebeek concrete. It wasn't invented in this country. It was a Frenchman, Jacques Hennebeek, I think he was called, who developed the idea of putting metal in concrete, etc. But one of the first places to apply it was in Hull. Part of Rosedown's some of Rosedown's older buildings, Rosedown and Thompson's older buildings, were built using Hennebeek concrete, the ones, I said, older ones from about 1900. And also, of course, if you go and walk down Cleveland Street, and you'll see the little plaque on the old bridge there that says this was the first bridge built with Hennebeek concrete. So, yes, we don't always necessarily invent things, but like everywhere, we innovate. But just to think about other things, Priestman's of Hull, the first commercially reliable internal combustion engine using heavy oils and the like diesel equivalent, was built by Priestman's in Hull, and it was successful. It worked. They built them. They used them for lighthouses. They even put one in an engine, but it never took off because they didn't have quite the financial backing that some of the people like Daimler and various other people had. But it developed, it worked, and they did sell it in various places. So that there's a lot of things like that were developed.
I'm going to ask you about one, and this comes in from Rachel to the Curiosity Cast. Was chip spice really invented in Hull?
What a thought.
Oh, we've gone whispery now. Well, it's almost like we're in a library.
It is.
It's a bit late now. We're in the quiet section.
It is, but yes, almost certainly, probably in about the 1970s. I think it was traditionally it's said to be Rod and Brenda Wilson, who sort of mixed up and brought up what they call American chip spice. But there's an interesting thing. Think about the role that we played in the fully fundamental English dish. Is there anything more English than fish and chips these days, right? And fish and chips, we don't know who invented fish and chips. You'll get celebrity chefs on the TV saying it was so-and-so. We don't know. But some genius put fish with chips. In that period, sort of 1840 to 1860, when the railways were being built and took transport all over the country, and allowed fresh fish, to become an article of cheap man's consumption. And some genius put that with fish. And then people added salt and they added vinegar. And then, of course, much more recently, as we continue to do, we refine things into the current age.
Right, okay. We almost got in a mushy pea conversation. And should you have gravy on fish and chips? But maybe that's another one for another one. So Rod and Brenda Wilson.
So they reckon, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, big up to them for the invention of chip spice.
Well, it was Yankee made, wasn't it? They made it for Yankee.
Yeah. And then it got used in all sorts of different places. Yeah.
Right. Okay. By the way, the voice that's coming in from the background on the Curiosity Cast is producer Dave, who's making some very worthwhile interventions, some of which have puzzled me. There'll be more of that to come. You can't resist it, you know. Right, we're going to... I like reading books. I know we're in the digital age, but we are in a library, and we'll come to a question about the books in the library in a bit. But we're in Hull Central Library doing this, the CuriosityCast. But I like reading books rather than reading things digitally. How many authors, is the question coming in, have come out of Hull? Asked by Sally in HU7, which is in North Hull, and Bobby across the river. And we've not even charged them a bridge toll for this question. Bobby in Barton wants to know how many authors have come out of Hull. Where we are. Is that a tough question?
That's a really tough question.
Either you've got wind or that's a really tough question,
That's
Dr. Robb Robinson.
That's a really tough question. It's difficult to say because, first of all, are you thinking about fiction? Are you thinking about non-fiction? Are you thinking about poetry? Are you thinking about people who've written plays? Whatever. It's a very difficult place. What you could say, basically, is a lot. When it comes down to it. Yeah, right.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, but let's just pick a few and think about who they might be.
Who might be the most successful author then?
Oh dear, I think that is a really difficult one to answer. But and again, it depends. I think what period you're looking at. I mean, if you think about modern days, people like Nick Quantrill, Vicky Foster are important. If we go back to the past, the first book arguably written by anybody from Hull, or they reckon, was by a bloke called Luke Fox.
Right. Okay.
Now, whether this is the first one, not is often said to me, but he was an explorer. He was looking for the Northwest Passage. He went on a voyage to the Northwest Passage in the 1600s, the first half of the 1600s. He came back and he wrote a book about it, which he called Northwest Fox. And he wrote not just about himself, but he wrote about all the other explorers who'd been up in the area. And it was published in, 1634, 1635, just before he died. King Charles I was one of the people who saw it was pushed through to be pushed. So he's almost the first in terms of that. But when we think about people who have either published or their works have been published afterwards. If we think about someone like Andrew Marvell, I mean, Not a lot of people knew that Andrew Marvell was a famous poet when he was alive.
Right.
A lot of his poetry was published afterwards, but we would attribute that to Marvell itself. And then in much more recent ages, we've got people like, think about Philip Larkin's work and where it's travelled in this country and across the world. Philip Larkin's not from Hull, but we associate Philip Larkin as being a whole person.
We'll claim him.
We will claim him as our own.
Yeah.
And that's, an important part of it, I think, who it is. But so books are important. Books are a crucial part of the city. Plays, poetry. We're very much a city of poets. One person I'm really into is the poet William Mason, who celebrates his 400th anniversary. I think it's 400 this next year.
I take it he's not writing limericks or anything.
He's not writing that.
Right, okay.
But it is in. He wrote extensively both gardening books in his age. He wrote political pamphlets. He wrote lots of poetry, and he was said to be the most famous living poet of his age. He wrote the biography of the first biography of Gray's Elegy, and various other people like that. So there's a lot of people out there, I think, who are pretty famous as authors. And for me, it's very difficult to say which one was the most famous.
Explain Gray's Elegy for those that
Elegy
might know.
in a graveyard. And leaves the world to darkness.
Graves.
And to me.
I thought you said graves.
Graves, yeah, it is. Gray. Elegy in a graveyard.
Right. Give us that again.
And leaves the world
to... A chill went down my spine
and
there.
Leaves the world to darkness and to me.
Oh.
I think I've got that right.
Well, producer Dave is nodding and running to the reference library.
Yeah, we just come back in a minute, Dave.
We'll stay, I think, Rob, on the... theme of books.
Yeah.
And we might need the abacus. We might need several. Actually, we might have to go digital. We might need a supercomputer. We might need a super librarian. I know a few librarians. They're all super, frankly. But I'm going to put you on the spot here on the CuriosityCast. How many books are there in Hull's Central Library?
I'll just have to go and check that. Will you hang on a minute? There's a lot out there. I'll just take my shoes and socks off, with the counting, and I'll have a word with the librarian. I'll be back in a minute.
It's a good job it's not scratch and sniff, this podcast. He's taking his shoes and socks off, and he's out the door with an abacus, or he'll find a librarian. While Rob's sorting out the answer to this question, and he will, I've every faith in him, please do get in touch with the CuriosityCast. We'll have loads of stuff everywhere, but you can send us your own question, however daft it might seem to you. We've had questions already, and some of them are absolute belters. And we'll answer it either in the next podcast, CuriosityCast, available at all good podcast places, or in the content you can find on the Curiosity social feeds. So you can message us at www.curiosityhull.co.uk, or you can find Curiosity Hull on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, God, we're down with the kids, and YouTube. So you can get your questions in there, and we'll do our very best to answer them. I do hope you're enjoying the first ever CuriosityCast. He's back. I don't know whether he's going to put his socks and his shoes back on. I think in the interest of public decency and my nasal hairs, probably best, actually. Dr. Robb Robinson, the question was, how many books are there in Central Library? I've just realised he took his shoes off and socks off now, so he could count on his toes as well as his fingers.
That's exactly why I did it.
It suddenly dawned on me. I'm not as quick as I used to be, Rob.
Neither am I.
Which was
it took me a while to whip round the shelves here.
Which was never quick in the first place. Okay. You'll have asked a librarian. Have you been running round?
I've been running round, but I saw a librarian, asked them, and they just trotted it off the computer. 182,491 books. 182,491 books. That's an incredibly good array. What a treasure house of information we have on the printed pages in this place.
That's amazing, really.
It is, isn't it?
No wonder it's a big building over many floors. And, well, I don't know. There will be something for everybody. If you've never been to a library or taken your kids or your grandkids, bring them in a library.
You would do. It's fascinating places, the libraries, and you always find something else other than what you went into to look for. And it's go if you've never been. If you haven't been for a long time, go again. It's some place to really visit and get your head round. And
librarians are cool, actually. Hello to Gav, who works in the library, who tweets me quite often. He's a top man. We'll follow up on the libraries, Rob, because Diane in HU11 in North Holderness wants to know how many libraries there are in Hull and the East Riding. I don't know whether she's planning a tour, but...
Be worth a look. That's a different thing to do. Well, there are 12 operational in Hull, 23 including a mobile library in the East Riding. You know, both councils run home library services where books, CDs, DVDs, etc. can be delivered to people who have difficulty leaving home. There's also a subscription service for care homes. So books are available. Books can be got at the fingertips quite quickly.
There's going to be another follow-up here, and I'm sorry if I'm butting in and asking a question here, but I think it's important. Just how important are libraries to our society?
For me, they're one of the most crucial things that people can get available to. Get people involved in reading books, and it opens a world of curiosity. Yes, we can use the internet, but what books give us is that actual stuff on the page. People have taken a long time assembling it. It's gone through being edited properly. It's a really important part of it.
Well, that's going to be it for this episode of CuriosityCast. We've been sort of beaten by the clock. Thank you for all your questions. We haven't got to them all, which means Dr. Robb Robinson will come back and join us on the CuriosityCast on a future episode. He's always very knowledgeable. I hope we've answered some of your curious questions. Dr. Robb Robinson has a new book out called Agnes to Zebedee. Is it something to do with the magic roundabout?
Not quite. It's to do with people from Hull who've made their mark nationally or internationally. All sort of proceeds from it go to the Lord Mayor of Hull's charities, and it's available in libraries and good bookshops across the city.
Pioneers of the great city of Hull. So thank you very much for listening. Remember, you can ask questions. Seek answers on the Curiosity website, www.curiosityhull.co.uk, or follow and befriend us on the socials, where we are Curiosity Hull on all the main feeds, Twitter, TikTok, etc., etc. We'll be back very soon with more quality answers to whatever question you'd like to ask.